Hi Extended Day, it's Miss Sarah, and today, keeping with our bee theme, I'm going to read you a story called The Bee Man by Laurie Krebs and Valeria Sis. And afterwards, we're going to do a quick pollinator project. Here is my grandpa, who is known in our town as the Bee Man. Here is his jacket with zipped up hood that covers his face just the way that it should when he visits his hives as the Bee Man. Here are his gloves, made of cotton and leather, protecting his hands in all kinds of weather when he tends to his hives as the Bee Man. Here is the beehive where all the bees sleep, tucked into a box called a shallow or deep, and then placed on a stand by the Bee Man. Here is the smoker that calms down the bees, and a hive tool that opens the beehive with ease for a much closer look by the Bee Man. Here is the queen bee who does her job well and lays tiny eggs in a 6-sided cell. She is the heart of the hive, says the Bee Man. Here are the drone bees with big bulging eyes and a large appetite supporting their size. They mate with the queen, adds the Bee Man. So there's the queen in the middle. Here are the workers, 10,000 or more, who gather the nectar to bring back and store in honeycomb cells for the Bee Man. Here are the house bees with swift-moving wings that dry up the nectar a worker bee brings, making honey for me and the Bee Man. Here's the extractor. It's clickety-clack, removing the honey from frames on its rack and filling up jars for the Bee Man. Here's some of the honey returned to the hive. It's food for the bees to help them survive the long winter days near the Bee Man. Here are the bees, protected from harm, inside the hive, huddled snug and warm, so they'll be here next year, says the Bee Man. Here is the wagon, filled up to the brim with bottles of honey collected by him and brought to the house by the Bee Man. Here are the muffins, all warm and delicious and dripping with honey on Grandma's best dishes. I'm glad that my grandpa's the Bee Man. And now here are some interesting little facts about bees. Bees belong to the insect family. They have 6 legs, 3 body parts, the head, thorax, and abdomen, 2 pairs of wings, 2 antennae, and 2 compound eyes that let them see in all directions. A bee begins as an egg placed in a tiny cell by the queen. The egg hatches into a worm-like creature called a larva. The larva changes to a pupa, and hidden inside the tiny cell, the pupa turns into a bee. When it hatches, the bee is finally grown and ready to be a member of the colony. It takes about 3 weeks to go from egg to a bee. So here's the egg, all the way to a bee. Bee colonies. Bees live in large groups called colonies. A colony of bees has 1 queen, several hundred drones, and tens of thousands of workers. Drone bees are male bees. They have huge black eyes and plump bodies. They don't work inside the hive or collect nectar and pollen. They mate with the queen. The queen bee has a slender body and is longer than the other bees. She is also the mother of them all. Her job is to lay eggs. In spring's busy season, she lays between 1 and 2,000 eggs every day. Worker bees are female and they have many different jobs. Sometimes they feed the larvae and tidy up the hive, or they create wax and use it to make new cells. Sometimes they groom the queen and give her a rich protein food called royal jelly, or they protect the hive from enemies by standing guard at the entrance. Sometimes they leave the hive to gather nectar, pollen, or water. Their job depends on what the colony needs them to do. Beekeeping. Diseases and pests have killed most of the wild bees, so today, beekeepers take care of the colonies. They provide weatherproof boxes where bees live. They act as insect doctors and supply medicine to keep the colony healthy. They check the queen to see that she is strong and that new bees are developing. Just before autumn, The beekeepers harvest the hive's extra honey, making sure they put back enough honey for the bees to use all winter. Beekeepers have special clothing that helps them do their job safely. They wear long gloves, coveralls, boots, and a hood with a protective veil to keep away curious bees. Hives. A beekeeper's hives are the boxes where the colony lives, raises its young, and stores its honey and pollen. Large wooden boxes called deeps are placed at the bottom. So those are the deeps. Stacked on top of the deeps are shallows, smaller boxes that hold the honey. As they are filled, more shallows are added by the beekeeper, and the tower grows taller. Frames and honeycomb cells. Frames are man-made wooden rectangles that support the honeycomb. They are lined up in the shallows and deeps like folders in a filing cabinet. The honeycomb is the cluster of wax cells built onto the frames by the bees to hold eggs, larvae, pupa, honey, or pollen. Smoker. Beekeepers use a metal container called a smoker in which they build a smoky fire. When beekeepers inspect the hive, they puff the smoke to calm the bees. Hive tool. A hive tool is used to help the beekeeper pry open the hive to examine it. Here's the extractor. When it's time to harvest the honey, beekeepers remove the frames from the shallows. With a hot knife, they cut away the wax cappings from the cells and place the frames inside a large bin called an extractor. It spins the frames and honey splashes against the walls, collecting at the bottom of the bin. Beekeepers open the extractor spigot and fill their jars with the tasty liquid. About honey. Honey tastes delicious. People have enjoyed it for thousands of years. At first, it was gathered from the nests of wild bees. Later, people made hives of clay or straw and kept bees and the honey they made near their homes. Honey begins as nectar, the sweet, watery juice inside a flower blossom. A worker bee unrolls her long tongue, called a proboscis, and sucks up the liquid just as though she were using a straw. Back in the hive, other workers put the nectar into cells and fan it to drive out the moisture. After many trips to the flowers and lots of fanning, the nectar juice thickens into honey. When the honey is ripe, the bees cap the cell with wax to keep it fresh. Pollination. Bees are important insects. Without them, we wouldn't have many delicious fruits, nuts, and vegetables. As bees travel to find nectar, they brush past the part of the flower that holds powder-like grains called pollen. The pollen clings to their hairy bodies. When they move on to visit the next blossom, some of this pollen is left on the seed-making part of that flower. Because of this, in time, fruits, nuts, and vegetables will grow. Bees help by carrying the pollen from one flower to another, allowing the process of pollination to occur. Bee dancing. Did you know that bees dance? Well, they do. And their dance tells other workers where nectar is found and how to get there. If food is close by, they do a round dance, running in circles, first one way, then the other, allowing the workers to smell and taste what they have found. The faster they dance, the richer the supply of nectar. If food is further from the hive, they do a wagtail dance. The longer they waggle, the longer the trip will be. Making a half circle in one direction, they turn sharply and waggle in a straight line until they again turn sharply and make a half circle in the opposite direction. The orientation of the dancer inside the hive tells the workers the direction in which they should fly. So when you see some bees waggling around, they're talking to their friends and letting them know where the food is. They're pretty smart. I hope you enjoyed that story. And now we're going to make a simple bee watering station so we can help our pollinators. All you need is a shallow dish. You could use a pie plate, or I have a little planter dish that I had. And you need some rocks. You can use marbles. You can use anything that you have around. And all you're going to do is place some rocks or marbles in your shallow dish so the bees have a place to land and drink their water. And then just fill it up with a little bit of water. You want to stay below the stones so they can stand on them, and then they can drink the water. And then the worker bees will drink this water and they'll bring it back to the hive, and they will walk around and give it to all the bees that live in the hive that need it. The water is also good to help thin out the honey so they can eat it, and it helps control the humidity in the hive. So it's a really easy way to help our pollinators. So I hope you guys enjoyed our story and our really easy project, and I will see you next time. Stay safe, guys.